Hey everybody, welcome to our live event. My name is Brenda KB Anderson, and today I'm going to be doing a knitting project with you guys, the Knitted Golf Club covers. So there is a free download. You can find a link to that in the description if you want to follow along or if you want to make these. I do have a whole bunch of charts and things in here which you'll need if you are going to be personalizing your golf club covers. So this is a live event. I'm glad that you guys are here. If you guys have any questions about anything I'm working on as we're working through the project, or if you just have any advice for other people or for me, definitely put that in the comments. I love to hear from you guys. So today, this is something that's pretty outside of my wheelhouse since I have to admit, it's like confession time, I'm not actually a golfer. There is golfing that happened in my family for quite a while. My grandmother was a very avid golfer. She really loved golf. But I am just not very coordinated and I didn't give it enough of a shot. So I am not a golfer, but I do have friends and family that are golfers. So this is something that it was kind of an exciting project. This was something that somebody actually had suggested. I love it when you guys suggest things, by the way. If you want to put anything in the comments for future projects, if you're interested in making something or learning a certain technique, I love to hear from you guys about that. But this did come from a suggestion, and I love it when people suggest things to me because it makes me think outside of my normal world of the things that I come up with, and I enjoy that. So definitely, if you guys have suggestions, let me know. Okay, so these golf club covers here, let me just kind of show you what they look like. They've been sized for 3 different sizes, okay? So we have the driver, the fair woods, and then your irons and a putter. Do I sound like I know what I'm talking about? Because I had to research all of that language, you guys. But yeah, because before this, I wouldn't have even known the difference between those, and obviously there's a huge difference between those things. But so we have different sizes that are, kind of to accommodate for the different shapes of your golf clubs. So this obviously is the largest one, the middle one. This is the one that I'm going to be working up in my samples today. So this is a fair woods or hybrid, and then this smaller one here for the irons. But they're all constructed in exactly the same way. They just have slightly, different stitch counts to account for the size differences or whatever. And so I'll kind of be talking through that as we're working our way through. I'm also going to be making this in gray because black, even though I really wanted these to be black with that great slime green color, I know you guys can't see black very well, so I'm switching over to the gray. So the rest of it will be the same. All right, so the way that these are constructed, just to kind of like tell you where we're headed, we're going to start by working in the round, and we're going to work the cuff. That's what I call this ribbed section here. We're going to work that on double point needles, or you could use, magic loop. You could use 2 circulars, however, whatever your method is for working in the round. You could even work this flat if you prefer. I just didn't want to sew that whole part up. So I'm working that part on double point needles. And then when we get to this part here, this is created actually flat because, first of all, we're working in an intarsia to put the green diamond in there. So the green part, the diamond shape, that's the only part that we're going to add using the intarsia technique. And then we're going to go in later and use duplicate stitch to put the numbers and the personalization on it. So, there's lots of different ways you could do this. Maybe you prefer to just do the whole thing as you could even do stranded if you wanted to, but there's a large section across the back where it's just black, but you could add something in there if you wanted to. You can definitely, change this up to a different method of working, but for me, this seemed like it was the easiest, the most straightforward. Plus, if you're not already familiar with those 2 ways of adding colors to your work, it would make an interesting live, right? So you can learn intarsia and also the duplicate stitch to add that personalization on there. So speaking of the duplicate stitch, I did mention this earlier. I do have a bunch of charts in here in your download, so that you can personalize it with whatever numbers make sense for your golf club set. And also I did add some letters in here, D for driver, H for hybrid, and F for fair woods. So I feel like I'm going to say fair isle by accident just because I'm talking about knitting. Anyway, so that's what that's all about. These are just ideas for you to customize. You certainly don't need to add that to it if you don't feel like you need the numbers or the personalization. But if it were me, I would like to know what they are before, so that way I can just see it at a glance and grab the club that I need. Okay, so as far as amounts, that's going to depend on how many you're making for your set. But I just bought 3 skeins of yarn, and I think that that would cover the majority of the clubs in the set that I'm doing this for. But you know, that is just going to kind of depend on how many you're making them for, and also like the sizes that you have and all that sort of stuff. But I do have yarn amounts in your materials, or within the materials section. It's about 210 yards in the main color, which is black, for a full, like all 3 sizes put together, if that makes sense. All right, so I'm using size 6 double point needles, so that's like a 4 millimeter. Let's see, where did I put that? Okay, yeah, 4.25 millimeter or 4 millimeter needles, but you can use whatever you need to in order to get the same gauge that I have listed in my pattern. Because these are, you know, I wanted this to be like a rugged project. Because we're putting it on pieces of metal, and they're going to be, you know, you're going to be carrying it around. I wanted it to be very sturdy. I didn't want anyone to have to worry about any, you know, holes peeking through or stuff shredding. So I knitted at a pretty tight gauge. So just, you know, just FYI, in case you're trying to figure out what needles to start with to check your gauge. Okay, so one thing that is important is when you do your cast on, you're going to want to cast on, use a method that is pretty stretchy, because especially if you look at this has to stretch over something that's this large. So you're not going to want the cast on edge to be restricting the stretch in that ribbed part there. So I am using the German twisted cast on method because I know that's nice and stretchy. And I'll leave about a little less than a yard or so of a tail. I'm going to make myself a little slip knot. This is how I start. I know some people just twist it. That's fine. However you want to do it, however you want to cast on is totally fine. I'm just going to show you this in case you've never done this one before. So I'm going to hold this in that slingshot position, and I'm going to be casting on 28 stitches because I'm doing the middle size. So I'm going to go under here and down around the top over to the other one. I'm going to grab that and pull it through the little window and drop it off my thumb and tighten it up. So if you need a little extra help, there are videos on the Knitting Circle website on how to do the German twisted cast on. There's probably a whole bunch of other stretchy cast on as well. So go ahead and look those up if you need a little refresher. Okay, so we've got 4, 5, 6, 7, and I like to cast onto one needle when it fits. 8, and then divide it later. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Got 8 more to go here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So there's our 28 stitches. Now we're going to divide that to start working in the round. So I'm going to put, it doesn't really matter right now how you divide it up. I'm just going to put the first 10 stitches on this needle. And then I'm going to add just one more, and I'll show you why in a minute. So however many stitches you want on the first needle, and then add just one extra. So I like to make the first needle be an odd number. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the second needle be an even number, and the third needle is now an odd number, but we're going to cast on one more stitch here. So we're casting on the amount that we needed, plus we're adding just one more, and that's just because of how I like to do my join. So then when you lay this down, if you've never worked in the round before, you want to locate all of those little twists that are along your needle and put them to the inside of a circle. Like you can make a little triangle like this and have them facing towards the inside, and then take your tail, just put it down in front of you. The other tail should be behind, if that makes sense. And now we're going to pick this up into this little triangle shape here. And we're going to so in my right hand, I've got the needle with the two tails on it. This is the yarn tail right in front. The longer yarn tail that's connected to the ball is behind it. Now I'm going to take my right hand needle and I'm just going to go over here to my left hand needle, and I'm going to slip a stitch purlwise. So I just insert my needle through here, and I'm going to slip it over onto the needle with the yarn ends. And then I'm going to take my left hand needle and I'm going to bring the second stitch over the one we just slipped, like that, and drop it off. And then I'm going to pull on my yarn tails just a little to snug them up, and that's going to make this a nice join, and we're ready to start working in the round. There's lots of different ways to do that. You can also just reverse which needle is where, and then just, let's see, if you have your beginning yarn tails on the right, and then you can just start knitting all the way around. You'll have like a little bit of a jog there, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter. Usually I just use the beginning yarn tail to just kind of fix that little jog when I weave in my end later. So, okay, so now that we're all joined up, ready to go, we're gonna start knitting. And we're gonna do 2 knits, 2 purls all the way around. So we've got 2 knits, 2 purls. And then we're going to repeat that. 2 knits, 2 purls, 2 knits, and 2 purls. 2 knits, 2 purls, and if you are newer to working on double point needles, this is the hardest part, I feel like, the first round or two. Once you kind of get going, it gets so much easier. So hang in there if you're doing this for the first time. It can be a little bit awkward. And trying out different needle types, like made out of different materials, can also help. If you find a stickier needle, your loops will slide around a little bit less. Like when you're first learning, I always recommend that people use bamboo or wood or like a sort of textured plastic. All right, where's that yarn tail? There we go. Okay, so we've done our first round of the ribbing, and we're going to continue. I'll do one more round here. So we're just going to keep on working in this 2x2 rib pattern for 30 rounds, or however long you want that part of your cover to be. So once you get the second round in there, then you are going to start to be able to see the pattern, the rib pattern. So it's going to remind you whether you're doing a knit or a purl. Oh, we've got a hello, Kiran from India. Hi, welcome. Thanks for popping in and saying hello. I'm still just working in that 2x2 rib pattern here. I'm working on my last needle for the round here. I usually don't end up using a stitch marker to keep track of the beginning of my rounds because I have this tail here to remind me of where it is. But if that's something that you know, you'd like to have a reminder closer up to your needles, you can always use a removable stitch marker or locking stitch marker and just lock it on that first stitch of your round. Oops. All right, so you would just continue working in the round and make sure, you know, if you're newer at this, make sure when you work that first stitch of a new needle, you really pull on your yarn tail right out as you're making it, as you're dropping it, or as you're forming that stitch. Make sure you're pulling on that yarn tail because otherwise you're going to get spaces between wherever your needles, you know, wherever you switch from one needle to the next, you'll get little ladders is what we call them. So that just can be avoided by really pulling hard, like when I would do the next stitch because it's the first stitch on the new needle. I'm pulling this pretty hard here with my finger, and as I'm dropping it off, I'm kind of tightening it up and kind of bringing it up next to that needle. So that will help you kind of stay on track. So you're going to keep doing that until you worked about 30 rounds, excuse me, about 30 rounds, and or your ribbing is as long as you want it to be. So this is not 30 rounds, this is probably only half that. So just imagine this is a little bit longer, and then I'm going to show you the next step on here. You can certainly make it longer if you want to. Just, you know, you can just knit until it's a certain length. You can just measure it and keep track of that for your other clubs if you want them to be all the same. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so now we're going to be working on row number 31 or round number 31. And so this is where we start doing some increases. Let's see, I'm going to bring this in here. So we've just done the ribbing up through round number 30. So on round number 31, we are, depending on the size, so if you were doing the first size, you would knit 5. If you're doing the middle size like I am, you're going to knit 6. If you're doing the largest size, you would knit 3. And then you're going to do an increase where you knit in the front and the back of the loop. And then you're going to repeat that 3 more times. So I'm going to be knitting 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we're going to knit in the front and knit in the back. So we're going to knit the front just like normal, but we're going to leave the loop there, and then we're going to put the tip of our needle in, sliding it in from right to left here into the back. So we're going to knit the back loop as well, just like that. And now we're going to repeat that. So knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we're going to knit front back. So we're going to knit in the front and knit in the back. And we're going to repeat that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Knit in the front, knit in the back. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Knitting in the front and knitting in the back. All right, so we've done our increases. So that would be a differing amount just depending on what size cover you're making. And now at this point, we're going to redistribute our stitches because I want the stitches that are going to be worked across for that diamond, I want those to be on the middle needle so that we don't have to keep track of all the other stitches really. So we're going to have, for this size, we're going to do 9 stitches on the first needle, and then we're going to do, let's see, right here, 9 stitches on the first needle, and all of them should have 14 stitches across the middle needle, no matter what size you're working on, and then I'm going to do 9 stitches on the third needle. And because I am going to be, if I was making the smallest size, I would just kind of slide those stitches into place. I would, count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, 9. I would move them over like this. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And then I would just continue to, redistribute like that. Oops, that was not my first needle. There we go. Here's my first needle right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, there we go. So I would just go ahead and redistribute like that, but because I'm making one of the larger sizes, on my next round, I'm going to be knitting 1 round for my size, or if you're knitting the largest size for the driver, you'd be knitting 4 rounds. So on this round right here, where you're just knitting every stitch, that's where you can also redistribute your stitches so you can count them as you knit them if you want. That's how I usually like to do it because it feels like it's somehow more efficient. I don't know if it is. So I'm going to do 9 on the first needle, 14 on the second, 9 on the third. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on the first. And then we're going to do 14 on this needle here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But we still need to have a total of 14. So 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So there's my middle needle. And then we'll do 9 here. We'll just double check and make sure we have the right amount of stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. There we go. Okay, so now we have finished a ribbing. We worked that 1 round here. If you were working the smallest cover, you just wouldn't work any rounds. You just redistribute your stitches. And then we're going to start working in stockinette. So the reason that I'm working in stockinette here is because intarsia is easiest to work when you work it back and forth in turned rows. You can work it in the round, but that just required too much. I was trying to keep this a little bit more simple. So in case you hadn't worked intarsia before, this is just going to make it so much easier. So at this point, we're going to work back and forth in turned rows. So you don't have to do anything special here. It's just after we work the first row, then we're going to turn our work and then work with the wrong side facing after that. We have a question. Are you self-taught? I was taught by my mom to knit when I was in my early 20s. I learned how to crochet when I was a little kid. She taught me that. She also taught me how to sew. She taught me lots and lots of things. But I have not studied professionally with anybody or anything like that. But I learned from my mom. And yeah, just learned from lots of other knitters too. And it's been really awesome being able to pick up tips and learn things from people, just, watching videos and stuff like that. It's just, we didn't have that when I was learning how to knit. It was basically like my mom sitting right next to me and helping me, putting her hands on my hands and saying, nope, do it like this. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Now we're going to be working on the stockinette section, and this is where we start doing the intarsia. Let's see here. Okay, so I have a chart here. This is going to show us what our piece is going to be looking like. This is the diamond shape that we're making. The gray is the black in my piece, or the gray in this sample here. So this is just representing those 14 stitches across that middle needle right here. So we can just knit across the first needle. Then when we get to the second needle, that middle needle, we're going to be following this chart for the color work. So we're going to start by just knitting across that first needle. Just knit all your stitches. And now we're on the second needle. And I can see just by looking at my chart, we're going to start. So when you are working from a chart in knitting, you're going to start at the bottom and work your way up. Okay, so I'm looking at these stitches as they come because I'm knitting from right to left. So I'm going to start here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the gray, and then the next 2 will be in green, and then the rest of them will be in gray. Okay, so I know I can go ahead and knit 6 stitches in the same color as I've been using. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to bring in our green. And whenever I join yarn, I mean, most of the time when I'm joining yarn, especially for intarsia, I just let that yarn hang out in the front. So this is where my last stitch was, right there. So right in front of my needle on the left, I'm just going to drop this right on through there. Okay, so I'm still knitting my way across. I'm going to just stop hanging on to the old color. I'm going to hang on to this new color. And remember, it's not actually anchored to anything. It's just sitting there between my needles. And I'm going to knit that with that green yarn. It can feel a little awkward at first because there's nothing holding it there. You just have to make your little loop. And don't worry if it's misshapen or weird looking, because we can kind of tug on the yarn and fix it as we go. So we're going to do 2 green stitches like that. And then in intarsia, especially, when you only have these 2 stitches, you might think, oh, I'll just grab that yarn and use that for the rest of it. But in intarsia, you keep a separate ball of yarn for each section of color. So if you take a look at this, that means you're going to have a ball of yarn for your gray over here, a ball of yarn for the green, and then a separate ball of yarn over here, because you're not carrying the yarn from here through your design to the other side. So one thing about that I really like, I mean, when you're working in color work, you can decide if you want to go by the rules or not. Sometimes when I'm working in intarsia, I do actually end up carrying my color for little tiny sections here or there if it just makes more sense. But you don't want it to show through. You also don't want it to constrict your work. And this is something where I didn't want there to be a bunch of floats on the back and that sort of thing. So that's part of the reason that I chose intarsia. It's nice and stretchy. You're not going to have those floats restricting the fabric or keeping it from stretching. So we're going to grab another ball of the gray yarn to start with. So I would make you can actually do this before you start, or if you've been working on it and you get to this point and you're like, oh, I forgot I don't have another ball of gray yarn, you can always just spool off a bunch of the yarn that you already, that it's attached to. You can just, put it in a pile and then roll it up. I do that all the time when I'm working in intarsia, whether it's in knitting or crocheting or whatever I'm doing. I don't often look ahead and figure out how many balls of yarn I need. I will stop and be like, oh, I need another ball of yarn, but this is connected to that yarn. Well, how much do I really need for this section? And I just sort of estimate by pulling it off, ball it up, and then the skein is free. So I feel like in intarsia, we're always taught, well, you should look ahead and make the balls of yarn before you start, but this is just not something that I usually end up remembering to do. So I just do it in my own method where I just make them as I go. All right, so I'm adding a second ball of the gray in. This is a new ball of yarn, and I'm going to add it in the same way. So I'm just going to lay it across in between those 2 needles like this. And I've dropped that green yarn. And I'm going to hang on to the new gray yarn that I have right here. Just hanging on to it. And I'm going to go ahead and just make a knit stitch grabbing that gray yarn. And then continue my way across. And I know it might seem weird at first, like that I just have these yarn tails hanging off the front of my work, but those are going to get woven in later. We can use a needle to push those through to the back. I really prefer them to be on the outside on the front so I can see them and they're not getting tangled up and I'm not accidentally grabbing one of these when I come back around and I'm looking for a yarn tail to knit with. So they stay a little bit more out of trouble if they're on the outside. All right. And now I'm on my last needle and I'm just knitting straight across. And here I am back at the beginning of my round, but we're working in stocking knot stitch, meaning we're knitting the front side of our work and purling the wrong side of our work. So we're knitting back and forth in turned rows. I know it doesn't look like it because I still have this circle here, but we have ended here, and I'm going to just turn my work like this so I can see the wrong side of my work, and I'm just going to be knitting in this direction. And that is basically how you switch from going in the round to working flat, even though this doesn't look flat, I know. So because we have the purl side showing, we're going to be purling all the way across this needle here. All right, so we made it across the first one. Here we are on the middle needle. Remember, the middle needle is where we're doing that color work, and you're going to be reminded because you can see it right here. So we're going to look at our chart, and we can see that row number 2 has exactly the same color pattern as the previous row. So if it's a gray stitch, you're going to purl a gray stitch there. If it's green, you're going to purl a green stitch. So we're going to be working across. There we go. We're going to be working across this middle row here, or this middle needle here. So I'm just doing purls across to where the green is. And here we go. There's our last gray stitch. And now here is what makes Intarsia actually work and not just become a bunch of separate knitted pieces. So when you're switching from one color to the next, they always say in the directions to pick up the color from below, but that has never really made sense to me unless I'm already doing it and I'm already doing it right. Then I can look at it and be like, oh yeah, I am picking it up from below. But for some reason, when I would read those directions and see, and it didn't mean anything to me. I didn't understand how you're picking it up from below. There's just these strands coming off your work. I didn't really get it. So I like to explain it a different way. After we have just finished the last stitch of a color, and we're going to switch to the next one. We take the old yarn and we're just going to lay it down basically parallel right on top of that needle where we're going to be knitting. Okay, so it's going in that direction, and the color we're switching to has to be underneath it. Okay. Okay, so if we had just finished and this color was somewhere else, like here, we couldn't do this and then just pick that one up and start using it, because that's actually above. See, the below above thing, it does make sense, and it is of course correct, but for some reason it doesn't remind me like how to arrange my yarns. So you just have to make sure that the next color you're using is on the first level here, right? So it's right on the back of your work, or it's coming straight down. And then you're going to take the color you've already used and you're going to lay it over to the side like that, like just on top of this color. Then we're going to grab this color and start using it. And so we're trapping that color in there. We're just locking it in. So I'm doing purls, remember, because we're working across the wrong side. And if this looks messy and weird and like there's a hole there, it's okay, because that's pretty common, especially when you're starting out. You kind of have to just rearrange and pull on your yarns in order to make them behave. You can always do that on the next row too. And then here's my next purl. And see, that loop's getting nice and stretched out because nothing's really anchored here. You have to just sort of always be, just kind of pulling on it until you get a little further into your project. Okay, so now we've done our 2 green stitches and we're going to switch back to the gray. So we have to make sure, first of all, that we're going to pick up the correct gray. So this gray is the one we just used, and that's staying over here on this side. Then this gray is for this section here, so that's the one we want. So we're going to take the color we just used, lay it down across this needle like that. Then we're going to pick up the gray that we want and start knitting with that, well, purling with that, I should say. Oops, I split my stitch a little. There we go. So we're just purling with that gray. And I know it looks very loopy. as soon as I get a couple more stitches done here on this needle, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tug on those yarns till they look like they're in the right shape. There we go. Okay, so this looks messy here, but that's okay. We can straighten it out a little. That's a big loop. That's because this is just sort of needs to be pulled on just a little bit. You don't want to pull it so tight that you're making the stitch go away, but you know, you just don't want it to be all loopy and have a bunch of holes between things. All right, so we're just going to continue with that same gray color, and we're going to finish up that row making the pearls. Oh, Jewel is wondering, what techniques do I specialize in? That is a good question. I particularly like cables. I also really like intarsia, but I don't do it as often as I do cables. But I guess if I had to pick a specialty, I would say making toys is my specialty. My background, so I come from a sewing background, actually. That was the first thing. Well, I learned how to crochet when I was really little, like 6. And my mom taught me how to sew when I was about that age as well. And that really took off, and I ended up having a sewing career for more than 20 years making costumes. I made like full body character costumes. So like, you know, like picture, I worked on like Sesame Street Live costumes, Paw Patrol costumes, Trolls, like the Touring Trolls show costumes, My Little Pony, all kinds of, you know, those kind of full body character costumes where you don't see the person in there. Well, usually you don't. So I did that for many, many years. And so while I was doing that, and maybe it's just the person that I am, I just really enjoy making cute little character things. And so I really, really love bringing that out with my knitting and crocheting and creating toys, because it makes me happy. But I do love all sorts of things. I love vintage stuff. I love cables. I love lace. It's not just, you know, I dabble in all of the facets. I really like learning new techniques. And the good thing is you will never learn everything. There's so much out there. You can always learn more stuff. Okay, so I've already started working on the next row. I don't know if you guys saw that. I turned my work, and now I'm facing the right side of my work, and I'm already working my knits all the way across to my color work here. I'll show you that one more time. So, I mean, not right now, but you'll see it again before we're done with this section. Okay. Here we are. And now we are at that section with the 14 stitches. That's our color work section. So we're going to look at our chart, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can see that this is just, I always like to look and make sure I know how many stitches it is different from the row before. So we're working row 3. This stitch is going to start right before the green where it already is right now, if that makes sense. So we're just going to knit our way across till there's 1 stitch left before we get to the green. There we are. So there's 1 gray stitch, and we are going to be switching colors. So we're going to take the gray, we're going to lay it parallel to our needle, okay? So we're always doing this on the wrong side of our work. Before, the wrong side was facing us, so this was on the side toward us, but it's always going to be on the wrong side of our work, so back here, okay? When we're looking at the right side, it'll be on the opposite side of the needle. And then we are going to bring up the green yarn from underneath. So see how they're going to cross over each other like that. And then we're going to knit across. And we're going to knit this stitch right here, and we're going to switch to the gray. So we're going to lay the green down parallel to that needle, and then we're going to pick up the gray. Make sure you're picking up the second gray, you know, not the one we just were using for working this section here. Okay, so now you can see our color work is starting to take shape. And we're just going to keep using those same techniques, working back and forth. So we'll work all the way over to here. And you can see it's split here because we're working in turned rows. Okay, so that's going to continue. And we're going to just work the next 23, well, a total of 23 rows here following that color, the color changes, and it's going to look like this. Here we are. So that's what your piece will look like after you've worked many more rows. This is what the back of it looks like. Okay, so there's, now it's in two separate sections. And at this point, like even partway through here, if you're like, oh, these double point needles are driving me crazy, there's no reason you have to work on double points at this point. You could change to a circular, you could change even to straight needles if you wanted to partway up. It just has to be enough so that this can be straight, basically, that this can kind of open up and be straight across. So that's definitely an option if it's kind of driving you crazy. So then at this point, so we've just finished up row number 23. So row number 24, I believe let's see, purling. Let's see. Yeah, we're going to purl one row. Georgia says, I'm trying so hard right now to crochet, but can't do it yet. Well, I don't know if you've already found the Creative Crochet Corner. That's usually where I'm living. I spend a lot of time over there doing these live tutorials. I have made myself quite a tangle here, you guys. But there's lots and lots of resources over there. I did a live event where I was teaching you the very fundamental, like single crochet stitch very slowly. But if you want to check out, there's lots of free stuff over there, and I do lots of tutorials for crocheting. Okay, so we just finished up working the last row in Intarsia. And now we're going to be doing just one purl row here, and then we're going to start our decreases. So I'm going to go ahead and work that purl row all the way across. Ooh, did I drop a stitch? Hold on. Oh, I see what happened. Okay. Somehow I dropped a stitch maybe when I put my yarn away. 1, 2. Oh no, I know what I did. Okay. We're going to have to just undo these couple of stitches here. Yeah. Okay. And do a couple more, and then we'll finish up. We'll fix this. There we go. There was our problem. I somehow must have skipped a stitch or dropped a stitch somewhere. All right, there we go. Now we're going to go ahead, turn our work as if we have just finished up row number 23 of that chart, the Intarsia, and we're going to be doing purl stitches all the way across. So we're going to do that, and then we will start our decreases. And I'll show you just a little example of each of the decreases, and then we'll move on to the duplicate stitch. All right. Oh, we've got some more comments here. Oh yeah, we got a link in there for learning how to crochet. Excellent. And Georgia says they're getting better at it though. Awesome. With the crochet, yeah. But I've only now conquered knitting. Excellent. There are days when I feel like I haven't conquered either, or really anything, but it's always fun to learn, right? Even if you know, I feel like it's one of those things where the more you learn, the less you feel like you know sometimes. But yeah, there is a certain amount, you know, when you're learning knitting or crocheting at the very beginning, I feel like it's the hardest when you're trying to get that muscle memory. Everything just seems like it takes so much effort just to do like a little, make some even stitches or something like that. But once you get that, then I feel like everything else, yes, you'll have frustrating times sometimes, but everything else is so much easier than that. The beginning is always the hardest, I feel like. That's probably true of a lot of things, though. All right. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to start those decreases. So in the decrease section in our pattern, it says to knit 2, then knit 2 together, and then slip, slip, knit. So we're going to do that. Oh, and actually, at this point, of course, you can cut off your contrast color and cut off whatever ball of yarn you're not using of the gray. So that will kind of free things up here. I feel like I'm tethered to my whole table because I'm making a big, kind of a twisted mess over here with all my samples. But now we're free. Okay, so we're going to knit 2 and then do a knit 2 together and then a slip, slip, knit. Okay, so we're knitting 2, so 1, 2, and then you'll knit a different amount depending, like if you're making the driver, the largest one, you would knit 4 here instead. But we're knitting 2, and then we're going to knit 2 together. So knitting 2 together, that just means you're making a regular knit stitch, except you're just coming over here to the second one and going through both of them at the same time, like that. So you're going from left to right and knitting them both as though they were one stitch. And then the slip, slip, knit. So we're going to slip from the left needle to the right needle. So I'm placing my needle here like I was going to knit it and doing the second stitch the same way. Then I'm going to knit them together through the back loop like this. Okay, so there's our slip, slip, knit. And then we're going to knit 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's just for the size cover we're making. We're knitting 4 here. And then we're going to do those decreases again. So we're going to knit 2 together. So we're just coming over here and knitting those 2 stitches as though they were one. If you just kind of squish them together, it's kind of like just doing a regular knit stitch. And then a slip, slip, knit. So we're slipping by putting our needle in as though we're going to knit it. So slip, slip, and then we're going to knit those 2 together through the back loop like this. All right, and then we're going to do that whole thing again. So we're knitting 2, 1, 2. And then we're going to knit 2 together. Let's see, did I get off somewhere? Knit 2, 2 together, slip, slip, knit, knit 4, knit 2 together. Okay, twice. So knit 2, 1, 2, one, 2, oops, I knit 1 too many there. And then we're going to knit 2 together, slip, slip, knit, knit 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we're going to knit 2 together, then we're going to slip, slip, knit, oh, and I'm supposed to knit 2, but somehow I got off. I think I got off somewhere over here somehow. Let's see. Let's just look at our stitches here. So we've got knit 2 together, slip, slip, knit. Then knit 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then knit 2 together, slip, slip, knit, and knit 2. Then we knit 2. Oh, those were, okay, I know how, I know where I messed up because I skipped to a knit 2. So we will just unknit this. So if you're unknitting, you're just going to be putting your left needle into your stitch and pulling out that yarn there. In case you've never done that before, I've done that so many times. It's Sad to say, but this is how we learn things, right? So you just put your left needle into your stitch and then pull the right needle out of it. And for things where you have a twisted stitches, like what we have here, we're gonna have to untwist those. Put them back on. And you always want to put them on so that the leg on the right is in front. Okay, so here is the problem right here. I was not supposed to knit those two together. I was supposed to knit two. So knit two. And then we knit two together. And then we have a slip, slip, knit, slip, slip, and knit. And then we knit four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Knit two together. There we go. And slip, slip, knit. And then we should only have 2 stitches left, which is what we have. So it's correct this time. Sorry about that, you guys. And we're going to knit 2 at the end. Okay, so just in that one row, we have shown you how to do both decreases that you're going to be doing. They should stack on top of each other. So as you work through the next few rows of the decreases, on row number 2, you're just going to purl across, no decreases. On row number 3, you're doing basically the same pattern. There's just going to be fewer stitches that you're knitting between your decrease stitches. So they'll be stacking on top of each other. And then if you look down here in your pattern, for the 2 larger sizes, you're going to do 2 more rows, another row of purling, another row of decreasing. And then for the driver, you're going to continue to do purling, decreasing, purling, decreasing, because that's just a larger piece. And then after that, you will just cut your yarn. Actually, let me show you where we're at here. So I've done some more of the decreasing here. I think I might have 2 rows left. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Okay, so I'm right after finishing row number 3 of the decrease section. So I'm gonna do a purl row and then a decrease row. Oop, I already did my purl row, looks like. So this is the last decrease row. So for me, I'm going to knit 0, so that means I don't do anything there. A lot of people have questions about that because it doesn't really make any sense. It's just a way of being able to keep all of the sizes written within the same line. So I'm not doing anything. Then I'm going to knit 2 together. And then I'm going to slip, slip, knit. And knit 1. Let's see, where am I? Nope. Slip, slip, knit, knit 0, sorry, knit 0 again. And then I'm going to knit 2 together, just right here, and then slip, slip, knit, slip, slip, knit. And then I'm going to do that whole thing again. So knit 0, so I don't do anything. Then I'm going to knit 2 together, and then slip, slip, knit. Again, knitting 0, and then knitting 2 together, and then slip, slip, knit. Just like that. Okay, so then when you're finished up, when you have done all of your rows, you're going to go ahead and just cut your yarn. Leave yourself a bit of a yarn tail though, so you can do a little sewing later. And then for now, we're going to just thread that onto a yarn needle. And I like to just bring that straight across and go in this side. And I'm running it through the rest of the stitches, like all the stitches that are still live. This is just going to become the top of the cover. Here we're just closing it up. Okay, so there's all of our live stitches. We're just going to close that. And I'm just going to let this tail hang out here for a while because we're going to use that later to sew. But before we do that, that's when we're going to start our intarsia. And normally I would get rid of all of these yarn tails in here because you don't want that to get in your way as you're doing the intarsia. But in the effort of being able to show you everything before I run out of time, I'm just gonna kind of tuck them out of the way. Maybe I'll just sort of stitch marker this one up here so it'll stay out of our way in the back. Okay. And then this, you may be wondering how, what to do with those yarn tails. You could just poke them right back through to the wrong side and you can weave them in. Okay, see how good that looks? All right, so that one, I'm just gonna tuck that one out of the way. I should have left it in the front really to do the duplicate stitch, but that's okay. We're gonna tuck it out of the way. All right, so basically you wanna clean up the back as much as you can, weave in your ends and all that before you start this, just so that you're not getting your yarns caught. So, and then in order to add whatever personalization you want to, I'm gonna be working from a chart here. I'm gonna do this number 3 here. So the green is just representing this diamond that's already here. So obviously you don't need to stitch the diamond on because it's right there. The reason it's on this chart is just sort of that you can kind of you will know where to put the other stitches. So duplicate stitch, if you've never worked duplicate stitch before, it is a very fun way to add some color or design or personalize things. It's very much like doing counted cross stitch or some kind of embroidery on your project, really. You're just following the anatomy of the knit stitches when you're adding it on top. So actually I'm gonna start with the black. I think I'll start with the black here of the 3. For me, when I do duplicate stitch, I just like to keep it simple and I just like to remember 2 rules. So my rules are work from the bottom up instead of top down. You can also work from side to side if you want, but if you're working from the bottom up, that's better than from the top down. It makes your stitches lay flatter. It just has to do with where your yarn is going to cross over on the back of your work as you're taking the next stitch. But if you remember, go from the bottom up, and then when you're going from side to side, you can go either way, from right to left or left to right. Your needle just has to be pointing in the direction that you're about to work in. So that'll make a little more sense in just a second. So I'm looking right here at my chart. I'm gonna start here on the bottom where the black is. So I can see there's 4 stitches here and they're gonna start in a little bit from this little jog. I'm just, looking for a place to start. And if I look here, here's my 3 stitches. There's my 3 stitches right there. I go down to the next one, there's that, and I'm gonna go down to the 3rd one, there's that, and it's just 1 up from that. So this is the line where I would start, and I'm starting on the 3rd stitch in from the left, right there. So this right here, this little tiny V, that's where I'm gonna be making my first stitch. So I'm gonna come out from underneath. And actually, sometimes I will do this. I will just start from the front of my work and stab my way through like this, because then that yarn tail is gonna be a little bit more out of the way. There we go. So there's my first stitch. I'm coming out at the bottom of the V, and I'm just gonna let this just hang out here. So this leg right here and this leg here, that's what I wanna be covering up. And I know I'm gonna be working from left to right because I'm starting right here and I'm working my way across in that direction on the chart. So I have to have my needle facing the way that I'm going. So I'm going to run my needle through underneath the 2 legs of the stitch just above it, okay? So I'm really embroidering down here, but it's going underneath the legs of the stitch above. And then it's going to go back down where I came from. And then I'm gonna get ready to do the next stitch, which is right next door, just right next to this stitch. So I'm gonna come out right here, right there. That was a little messy. I kind of had a yarn tail in the way when I was pulling on that, but that's okay. All right, so there's my very first stitch. And now I'm gonna do the next one right next to it. And remember, my next stitch is gonna be this way, so I'm putting my needle through from left to right. And if that's awkward, you can turn your piece like this and have it be kind of like sideways. So there's the first leg. We're going to go back down right here, and we're going to come up in the stitch right next to it. Like that. So let's see, how many do I have? 4 in black. There we go, there's the third one. And here is the fourth one. And then I can go up to the next row here. So I'm going to start over here on this stitch. So that's just one away. So if I look at this, after I make this stitch, if I was going right next door, it would be here. But I'm going to go right above it. So that is the next stitch that I want to come up at the base of that stitch. So you're always coming up at the base and then going, then you're doing the two legs, excuse me, the 2 legs of the stitch. Now I'm going to be working in this direction, so I'm going to hold my needle this way. So I'm going to go underneath the legs of the stitch above. And go back right down into where we came out. And then the next stitch is right here, just above that one. Right here. Going right down where I came out of, and I'm going to come out of the next stitch. Okay, so basically we're just working back and forth in horizontal rows right here. But let's just say this would not be following my chart, but let's just say we wanted to go up, like in this direction, or if there was like a longer, like if we were making this section of the one here, you could go back and forth all the way up, or you can go up, and then you can also go up from the bottom here next to it. Just depends on how you want to do it. But I would not recommend going down because of the way that we're making our stitches. It just makes it look less tidy. You can try it and you'll see what I mean, but learn from my mistakes, you guys. Always think about it as working from the bottom up. It makes your stitches just look a lot more even. I know it doesn't seem like it would matter, but it does. And then when you're going back and forth, you're always going to be just holding your needle facing the way that you are going to be, where your next stitch is going to be, the direction that you're going to be traveling in as you're making those stitches. Oh, I missed a bunch of stuff here, you guys. Okay. Oh, and Giorgio's saying they were ill. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you feel better. I'm glad that you're here though, and that you can, have a little bit of comfort with the knitting and the crocheting that you're trying out here. Aw. Oh, and they're thinking about making this for their dad. That's really awesome. Cool. Okay, so back to this. If you were going to be working a longer column and going straight up, then it doesn't really matter which way your needle is facing because you're going up. You're not going from side to side. But I just want to show you how to do a couple of stitches. I'm not following my chart anymore, just so you know. I'm just kind of going rogue here because I just want to make sure that you guys know what that looks like when you're working in like a longer vertical piece. Here we go. And I find sometimes I do have to sort of manipulate my stitches a little when I'm pulling them tighter or when I'm kind of pulling it through. So here we are, we're just gonna come up right at the base of that next V. Right there. And we're gonna go underneath the legs of the V above it. Like that. Going back down where we came from and then coming up at the base of the next V, which is right there. And my best advice about doing duplicate stitch is to, you know, just don't try to do it too quickly, because it really, I feel like it just takes a little bit of finessing to get your stitches to just kind of lay in the right spot and not have a bunch of color between. Oftentimes I will see people suggest, you know, that you do your duplicate stitch in a brighter color and the background in a darker color, which is very much the opposite of what I'm doing here. And the reason is because sometimes you get a little bit of peek through, like you can see a little bit of the green right there. And it, you know, it can be a little bit distracting if it happens a lot. So people generally suggest when you're doing something in duplicate stitch to make the part that you're stitching, the yarn that you're stitching with, that be something that's brighter and kind of comes forward, comes, you know, it shows up a little bit more than the background color. But, you know, can't always go by all the rules, you guys. There we go. So this would be how you would add those columns in there. Doesn't matter which way your needle's facing when you're going straight up. It just matters which way it's facing when you're doing a bunch of stitches next to each other from side to side. So you'll just follow your chart here. So the areas that you're going to be, you know, adding in here, you do I usually do the black first and then do the white around it, and then I add in these little diagonal lines. And when you're doing the diagonal lines, these are kind of easy to mess up because you really have to, here I'm going to show you on the gray so you can actually see my stitches. You really have to be, if you're going from the bottom up for something like this, you know, because it's going from here up, you have to start out here. It's a lot easier to start here and go downward, but it makes your stitches look not quite as tidy. You can try doing it that way. Might be okay because this is just a diagonal instead of straight down. But I like to go from the bottom up, so I will take a look at where my top stitch is going to be here and then count my way looking at the stitches until I get to that fifth stitch, and that's where I start and make my way back up to here. So just a little tip, just take your time on that. Make sure you know what stitch you're really going to be starting with, because it is a little bit tricky when you're looking at knit stitches, because it's not like it's a cube. It's not like it's just like this. It's not a square, it's that V. So make sure you really know which stitch is next to it and which stitch is diagonal from that stitch. Just kind of like take a moment and make sure. If you're not sure, find the one that's right next to it first and then go right above or right below that when you're trying to figure that out. All right, so when you are finished with all of oh, this is what it looks like on the back. That is just there because I had stitched in to start. So it actually looks pretty tidy on the back. When you're done with that, you can just go ahead and stitch this up. So you can use a mattress stitch is I think what I used. You could use whip stitch, whatever you like to use, to just sew that seam in there. And then you're gonna make a pom-pom and stitch it to the top, and that's it. So if you need extra help on making pom-poms, I know there are videos for sure on the Creative Crochet Corner, because I did one of them on making pom-poms, but if you wanna check that out. But I think there's also videos on pom-pom making on the Knitting Circle as well. So there's lots of information for that. But there is, in your download, there is specific written out directions on how I make my pom-poms. You can make them however you like to make them, whether you have a pom-pom maker or not. I usually write my directions up by using just a piece of cardboard, so you don't need to have that. Yeah, and maybe you're anti-pom-pom and don't need a pom-pom on the top of your Golf Club cover. I thought they were super cute. I love pom-poms, so I added them. But anyway, so there's some extra help for you guys if you need a little help finishing that up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate that you guys were here and active in the chat, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye, everybody.